The silent blizzard. It was Christmas Eve, and the small group of friends was finally headed home after a long night of festivities. The celebration had been warm, filled with laughter, food, and the cozy glow of twinkling lights. But as they climbed into their SUV, the snow began to fall heavier than anyone expected. The roads were empty, the world blanketed in white, and the car's tires crunched softly as it moved along the back roads of Pine Hollow. The friends, Samantha, Jordan, Emily, and Blake, were no strangers to this route, having grown up together in the little town. But tonight the road felt different. The deeper they drove, the thicker the snow fell, until the windshield wipers barely made a difference. "Maybe we should turn back," Samantha said nervously from the passenger seat, staring into the swirling storm. "This is getting bad." Blake, behind the wheel, shook his head. "We'll be fine, it's just snow. I've driven through worse." But as the minutes dragged on, the snow became relentless. The road disappeared under a thick, unbroken blanket of white, and the trees lining the road became strange, jagged shadows. Suddenly, the headlights picked up something standing just ahead, black shapes in the snow. Jordan squinted from the back seat. "Is that a person?" Blake slowed the car to a stop. Ahead, figures stood silently in the middle of the road, 5 of them wearing dark coats and wide-brimmed hats, their faces obscured. They were perfectly still, and the snow piled unnaturally high at their feet, as if they had been standing there for hours. Emily leaned forward. "Who would be out here in this storm?" The figures didn't move. Blake hit the horn. "Hey, move!" The horn echoed through the blizzard, but the figures didn't react. One by one, their heads tilted upward in unison, slow and unnatural, revealing pale grayish faces beneath the brims of their hats. Their mouths hung open far too wide, as if screaming silently into the storm. "Drive," Samantha whispered, gripping Blake's arm. Blake slammed his foot on the gas. The SUV lurched forward, tires spinning on the snow, and the figures parted just enough for the car to pass through. As they sped by, Emily screamed, "Oh my God, look!" Every single one of the figures turned their heads to follow the car. Their mouths gaped open farther still, like deep black holes, until they looked less like people and more like something wrong, something impossible. The road seemed endless now. Blake drove in silence, hands tight on the wheel, his knuckles white. The friends didn't speak. Outside the car, the snow fell heavier, and the figures reappeared. At the edges of the road, standing among the trees, their faces barely visible in the headlights. "They're watching us," Jordan whispered. Then the car skidded. Blake lost control for just a moment, but that was enough. The SUV veered off the road, slamming into a snowbank. The engine sputtered and died. "Start it up," Samantha shouted, her breath fogging the air. Blake turned the key again and again. Nothing. The engine was dead. Silence settled over the car, broken only by the howling wind. The headlights cut through the storm, revealing the road ahead, and the figures were moving now, stepping closer through the snow. Their mouths stretched into grotesque smiles. "They're coming," Emily whimpered. "We have to run for it," Jordan said. "If we stay here, we're sitting ducks." Blake hesitated, but they had no other choice. The 4 of them burst from the car into the freezing storm. The snow was waist-deep, the wind like icy knives against their skin. They stumbled forward, trying to find the road, but the world was nothing but white. "They're everywhere!" Samantha screamed, pointing. The figures emerged from the snow, surrounding them. Their black coats flapped in the wind, and they reached out with unnaturally long arms, their fingers crooked and sharp like talons. The friends ran, but the storm was blinding. One by one, the screams began. First, Emily. She was pulled backward into the snow, disappearing beneath its surface with a muffled cry. Then Jordan, who turned to help, was grabbed by pale hands and dragged into the dark. Samantha and Blake pressed on, stumbling and shouting for help that would never come. Keep going, Blake yelled, pulling Samantha forward. But then the storm stopped. The snow fell still, the wind died, and all sound disappeared. The world was silent. Blake turned to look behind him, but Samantha was gone. He was alone. The figures stepped toward him from all sides, their faces grinning, their mouths stretching open wider and wider. Blake stumbled backward, falling into the snow as the figures loomed over him. Their mouths moved, but the silence persisted, until one sound finally broke through. It was laughing, deep, hollow laughter that seemed to come from everywhere at once. And then the snow swallowed him whole. The next morning, Pine Hollow's search and rescue team found the SUV abandoned in a snowbank. There were no footprints, no signs of a struggle, only the car, with its doors flung open, and a thin layer of frost coating the inside of the windows. The road was quiet and the storm had passed. But the snow, it was unnaturally deep, and somewhere buried far below, the sound of laughter still echoed.